They thought they were making a clean exit. Walking away, choosing someone else, or simply disappearing felt like the obvious solution to their mounting anxiety. The relationship had become too close, too real, too demanding of their emotional presence. Betraying you seemed like the path to freedom, the way back to the independence they craved. They didn't calculate the cost. They didn't consider that some actions create consequences that never stop unfolding. The avoidant believed they could move on cleanly, that their detachment would protect them from fallout, that starting fresh meant leaving everything behind, including the damage they caused. But betrayal doesn't work that way. It doesn't stay contained in the relationship that ended. It seeps into everything that comes after, poisoning their capacity for connection, destroying their self-concept, and creating a pattern of loss they cannot escape. The avoidant had no idea that destroying you would mean destroying themselves. The immediate relief illusion. The moments after betrayal feel exactly like the avoidant imagined. The anxiety that built to unbearable levels suddenly evaporates. They experience profound relief that confirms their decision was right. The suffocating feeling of being trapped in commitment lifts, and they can breathe again. This initial period reinforces their worldview about relationships being threatening and independence being safety. They feel validated in their avoidance, certain they've saved themselves from something that would have destroyed their autonomy. The relief creates a honeymoon period with their new choice. Everything feels lighter, easier, more manageable. If they betrayed you for someone else, that person represents possibility without the weight of real intimacy. The avoidant moves through days or weeks, convinced they made the right choice, that the guilt they feel will pass. They're riding the high of escaped obligation, not yet aware that they're in the eye of the storm rather than past it. But relief is not resolution. The avoidant has escaped the anxiety of intimacy without addressing its source. The relief is temporary because it's based on avoidance rather than growth. As time passes and initial euphoria fades, the avoidant recognizes they've brought their same patterns into their new situation. The relationship they destroyed haunts their new beginning in ways they didn't anticipate. The guilt accumulation effect. The avoidant doesn't experience guilt like others do. Their defensive structure minimizes emotions that threaten their self-concept. Initially, they rationalize the betrayal. They tell themselves you'll be fine, that the relationship wasn't working, that they had to do what was right for them. But guilt doesn't disappear through rationalization. It accumulates beneath conscious awareness, building pressure that eventually demands acknowledgement. Subscribe to understand how attachment patterns create these cycles and what it means for your own healing journey. The avoidant starts experiencing symptoms they don't connect to the betrayal: disrupted sleep, vague anxiety, irritability. The guilt intensifies when the avoidant witnesses your struggle. Seeing evidence that you're not okay forces them to confront their impact. They can no longer maintain the fiction that their choices only affected them. They've damaged another human being who trusted them, and this recognition creates guilt so profound it threatens their entire sense of self. The accumulated guilt manifests as self-sabotage. The avoidant might destroy the new relationship they betrayed you for, unable to enjoy something built on another person's pain. they might engage in behaviors that punish themselves. The guilt operates underground, shaping choices and limiting capacity for happiness without conscious recognition. They just know nothing feels right anymore, that something essential has been corrupted. The self-concept destruction. The avoidant's identity is built on not being the bad guy. They might be emotionally unavailable, they might need excessive space, but in their narrative, they're not cruel or harmful. They're just protecting themselves, maintaining boundaries, being honest about their limitations. Betrayal shatters this self-concept completely. The avoidant is forced to recognize that they've done something genuinely harmful, that their self-protection came at someone else's expense, that their fear made them capable of cruelty. This recognition is devastating because it means they're not who they believe themselves to be. They're not the reasonable person setting healthy boundaries. They're the person who betrayed trust, who caused pain, who acted selfishly and destructively. This destruction of self-concept creates an identity crisis that permeates everything. The avoidant can no longer trust their own moral compass or believe in their fundamental goodness. They've proven themselves capable of behavior they judged harshly in others. They've become the villain in someone else's story, and that villain is them, not a distorted perception or misunderstanding. The betrayal is a fact they cannot reframe or minimize. They did it. They chose it. And that choice reveals something about their character they cannot accept but cannot deny. The cognitive dissonance between who they thought they were and who their actions proved them to be creates psychological fracture. The shattered self-concept makes it impossible for the avoidant to trust themselves in future relationships. They know what they're capable of when anxiety becomes too intense. They know they'll protect themselves regardless of who gets hurt. They know their fear is stronger than their integrity. This self-knowledge becomes a prison. The avoidant cannot promise themselves or others that they won't betray again because they've already proven that when intimacy feels threatening, they'll destroy it to escape. They become someone they cannot believe in, and this internal distrust prevents them from ever fully committing or connecting again. They've ruined not just your life, but their own capacity to trust themselves in relationship. The relationship contamination pattern. The betrayal contaminates every relationship that comes after. The avoidant carries unprocessed guilt and shame into new connections, poisoning them from the start. If they betrayed you for someone specific, that relationship is built on destruction. They cannot fully enjoy something that began with harm. Every moment of happiness is shadowed by knowledge of what it cost. The new relationship becomes a constant reminder of their betrayal, rather than the fresh start they imagined. Even if the avoidant didn't betray you for someone specific, the pattern continues. They approach new relationships knowing they're capable of betrayal, and this knowledge creates distance. They cannot be fully vulnerable because they're monitoring themselves for signs they might betray again. The new person receives a guarded version of the avoidant who's even less capable of intimacy than before. The contamination also means the avoidant compares everyone to you. They remember what they lost, often idealizing it now that it's gone. New people don't measure up to the connection they destroyed. The avoidant recognizes qualities in you that they took for granted, ways you understood them that no one else does. This comparison makes satisfaction impossible. they cannot return to what they destroyed, and they cannot fully invest in what comes after. The karmic repetition cycle. The avoidant discovers that what they did to you gets done to them, often in ways that feel specifically designed to teach them what betrayal feels like from the other side. They might enter a relationship with someone who treats them the way they treated you, with inconsistency, emotional unavailability, and ultimate betrayal. They experience firsthand the confusion, pain, and self-doubt they caused. This isn't cosmic punishment, but predictable pattern. The avoidant, now carrying the wound of their own betrayal alongside their original attachment wounds, attracts and is attracted to dynamics that mirror their damage. They find themselves in the position they put you in, and the experience is excruciating. The repetition forces empathy. The avoidant couldn't access when they were the one doing the betraying. They feel what it's like to be left, to be replaced, to have trust destroyed. They understand the specific agony of being betrayed by someone they loved and trusted. This forced perspective is devastating because it retroactively amplifies their guilt. They cannot unknow what you experienced. They cannot minimize or rationalize now that they've felt it themselves. The avoidant is confronted with the full weight of what they did to you through their own parallel experience, and the recognition is crushing. They ruined you in ways they didn't comprehend, and now they comprehend it fully. The karmic cycle also manifests as the avoidant becoming unable to trust others. They project their own capacity for betrayal onto everyone they meet. If they could betray someone who loved and trusted them, why wouldn't others do the same? The avoidant becomes hypervigilant, suspicious, unable to believe in anyone's consistency or integrity. They've lost faith in human goodness because they've seen their own lack of goodness. This paranoid stance prevents genuine connection and ensures they remain isolated. The betrayal has made them incapable of the trust that relationships require, trapping them in exactly the isolation they thought they wanted, but discovering it feels nothing like freedom. The lost authenticity wound. Betrayal requires the avoidant to become someone they're not, to lie, to hide, to deceive, to act in ways that contradict their stated values. This performance damages something essential in their psyche. They lose access to authentic self-expression because they've proven themselves capable of profound inauthenticity. The avoidant can no longer trust their own words or intentions because they remember how convincingly they performed normalcy while planning betrayal. They remember looking you in the eye and lying, and this memory contaminates their relationship with truth itself. They become someone who cannot believe themselves, whose internal experience feels unreliable, whose authenticity has been compromised in ways that cannot be repaired. This lost authenticity makes the avoidant feel hollow. They go through motions without genuine feeling behind them. They say things they think they should say, rather than things they actually mean. They perform relationship rather than experiencing it because they've lost connection to what genuine connection feels like. The betrayal required them to split into performer and authentic self, and they can never fully reintegrate. Part of them is always watching, always aware of the gap between presentation and reality, always remembering that they're capable of complete deception. This internal division prevents presence and ensures they're never fully in any moment or relationship. The wound also means the avoidant can never be fully known. They've learned that revealing their authentic self leads to judgment and consequences. They showed you who they really were through their betrayal, and that revelation destroyed everything. So they hide now, even from themselves, even in relationships where hiding might not be necessary. They cannot risk another situation where their true self is exposed and found wanting. The betrayal taught them that authenticity is dangerous, that their real self is capable of terrible things, and that protection requires maintaining performance at all times. This defensive inauthenticity ensures they remain isolated behind a facade that prevents real connection. The irreversible trust damage. The avoidant cannot undo what they've done, and this irreversibility haunts them. They might want to apologize, to explain, to repair, but the betrayal has created damage that cannot be fixed. Even if you forgave them, even if you took them back, the relationship could never return to what it was. Trust, once destroyed through betrayal, cannot be fully rebuilt. The avoidant knows this intellectually, but the emotional reality of having destroyed something irreplaceable only settles in over time. They carry the knowledge that they ended something that could have been beautiful, that they had something valuable, and destroyed it through their own fear and selfishness. This irreversible damage extends beyond the specific relationship with you. The avoidant has damaged their own capacity to trust themselves. They cannot promise themselves they won't betray again because they've already broken that promise. They cannot believe in their own integrity because they've proven themselves capable of acting without integrity when threatened. This internal distrust is permanent. Even if the avoidant does extensive therapy and personal work, even if they develop greater capacity for intimacy, they will always carry the knowledge of what they did to you. It becomes part of their history they cannot erase, a permanent marker of their lowest moment. The irreversibility also means the avoidant loses the chance to see what the relationship could have become. They wonder constantly about the path not taken. They imagine the life they could have built if they'd faced their fears instead of running. They think about who they could have become if they'd done the work of healing within the relationship rather than destroying it. These alternative futures torture them precisely because they're forever unavailable. The avoidant made a choice that closed doors permanently, and they must live with having eliminated possibilities they desperately wish they could explore. The regret becomes unbearable because it's attached to something that can never be retrieved or repaired. The isolation consequence reality. The betrayal ensures the avoidant ends up exactly where they feared most, completely alone, but in a way that feels like punishment rather than choice. They thought they wanted independence and space. They get it, but it's empty rather than peaceful. The isolation after betrayal is qualitatively different from chosen solitude. It's contaminated by guilt, shame, and the knowledge that they're alone, because they destroyed the connection that was available. The avoidant sits in their apartment or their life and recognizes that the emptiness isn't freedom. It's the natural consequence of having made themselves untrustworthy and unsafe for others. The isolation is also enforced by their own understanding that they shouldn't inflict themselves on others. The avoidant knows they're damaged, knows they're capable of harm, knows they haven't healed the patterns that led to betrayal. Engaging in new relationships while carrying this unresolved damage feels irresponsible. They cannot in good conscience get close to someone new when they know their patterns will likely hurt that person too. So they stay isolated, not because they want to, but because it feels like the ethical choice. They're protecting others from themselves, which is noble, but creates a loneliness so profound it becomes unbearable. The isolation also prevents the healing that could break the pattern. The avoidant needs connection to heal attachment wounds, but they cannot risk connection because their wounds make them dangerous to others. They're trapped in a catch-22 where healing requires what they cannot safely engage in. Time alone doesn't heal attachment trauma. It just provides space for defenses to solidify and patterns to calcify. The avoidant becomes more isolated, more defended, more convinced they're fundamentally broken. The betrayal set in motion a cycle of increasing isolation that they cannot escape alone, but reaching out for help requires vulnerability they can no longer access. The meaning crisis development. Betraying you forces the avoidant to confront questions about meaning and purpose they've been avoiding. If they're capable of destroying someone who loved them, what's the point of their existence? If their fear makes them harmful to others, what value do they bring? If relationships are unavailable because of their damage, what makes life worth living? These existential questions don't have easy answers, and the avoidant spirals into depression and purposelessness. They cannot find meaning in work, hobbies, or achievements when they know they've failed at treating others with care and integrity. The crisis intensifies as the avoidant recognizes their entire framework for understanding life has been based on avoiding pain rather than creating value. They've organized existence around not being hurt, not being vulnerable, not needing anyone. But this organization hasn't led to happiness or fulfillment. It's led to isolation, guilt, and destruction of something precious. The avoidant must rebuild their entire value system, find new ways of understanding what makes life meaningful when the old ways have proven bankrupt. The meaning crisis includes recognizing time is passing and they're wasting it. The avoidant looks back at years of relationships they sabotaged, connections destroyed, opportunities for intimacy rejected. They see patterns of loss they created, a trail of damage they're responsible for. Change requires facing the wounds that drive the patterns, the thing they've spent their life avoiding. The permanent regret installation. The betrayal installs a permanent form of regret that differs from ordinary remorse. It's not about wishing they'd made a different choice. It's about knowing they've irreversibly damaged both you and themselves, that they destroyed something they'll never stop missing, that they acted from fear in a way that created exactly what they feared most. This regret doesn't fade with time. It actually intensifies as the avoidant matures and develops capacity to understand what they lost. Years later, they'll think about you and feel the full weight of what they destroyed. They'll see couples building life together and remember they had that option and rejected it entirely. They'll experience moments of intimacy in new relationships and recognize that nothing compares to what they had with you. The permanent regret becomes a companion the avoidant carries through life every single day. It surfaces at random moments, a song, a place, an anniversary of something significant. It colors their experience of new relationships because they're always comparing to what they lost. It makes satisfaction impossible because they know they had something better and destroyed it. The regret is particularly painful because it's entirely self-created. The avoidant cannot blame circumstances or bad luck or another person. They made a choice, and that choice created consequences they must live with forever. The knowledge that they're the architect of their own misery, that they had happiness available and rejected it, makes the regret unbearable. The regret also means the avoidant can never fully move forward. Part of them remains frozen at the moment of betrayal, constantly reviewing the choice, imagining different outcomes. This psychological fixation prevents presence in current experience. The avoidant cannot fully invest in now because they're trapped in the past. They cannot build a future because they're mourning the future they destroyed. The betrayal becomes the defining moment of their life, not because of what they gained, but because of what they lost. And they spend the rest of their life knowing they ruined not just your life, but their own.